You're looking at a bowl game where an anthropomorphic Pop-Tart being cooked and then eaten by the winner is like the draw. Like, you have to have something that insane to get people to watch. Welcome to this episode of the Maza's Musings podcast. I'm going to admit I'm a little salty heading into this episode, and that's because, objectively, one of the best teams in college football won't be playing in the college football playoff. That's largely the topic of this week's episode. The main topic, we have Christian McCollum, who is a recruiting analyst for Irish Sports Daily, joining me to talk about what exactly happened and where we go from here and some of the fallout. We sift through it, some of the fallout from that decision and some of the comments and actions that were taken after that. So, not as positive of an episode as we sometimes have. But we are going to kick things off on a positive note. Of course, with Meghan's Cuckoo Bananas Joke of the Week.
And now it's time for Meghan's
Cuckoo Bananas Joke.
Hi, Meghan.
Hi.
Do you have a joke for us today?
Yuppie.
Okay, let's hear it.
Who delivers Christmas presents to cats?
I don't know. Who delivers Christmas presents to cats?
Santa Claus.
Oh, like claws, not like Santa Claus.
Not Santa Claus. Santa Claus.
I like that one.
Reindeer paw.
What? Okay.
Reindeer paw.
Okay, say goodnight, silly.
Good.
All right. Well, before we get into Maza's Mickey Minute this week, we did have some people who chimed in on the topic that Eileen and I talked about last week. And we basically were doing the love it, like it, leave it thing, where we were taking a random group of 3 movies and deciding which one was our favorite, the one that we loved, which one we liked. It's a movie that we could keep or leave it, just toss it out. It's no good. And some of these were more challenging than others. And we invited you guys to play along as well. We had it up on our Facebook page. And if you are not following us on our Facebook page, it's easy enough to find. You just go and search for the Maza's Musings podcast. Yeah, there's an actual link to it, but, just searching for it is usually the easiest way to get there. And so we did have a couple of responses. One of them, of course, being our friend Dan. Dan regularly likes to play along with these kinds of things. And so let me pull up what he had to say about it. And Dan he's closing in on, I don't know if he's done it yet, but he's closing in on watching his 1000th movie. Big movie buff, also a big stage buff. So let's see what he had to say here. Okay, so for the first group, he had his love it was Mickey's Christmas Carol. His like it was How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And his leave it was Elf. He said, I like it, but I don't have any attachment to it. For love it, Home Alone, which he says was his first movie in theaters. And as I mentioned, he's about to see his 1000th. Well, Home Alone is soon to be his 1000th, he said. Like it is Frosty. And his leave it was Polar Express, but he said he remembered liking it, but he's only seen it once. His love it for the next group was Charlie Brown Christmas. He said all day, every day. He said his like is A Christmas Story. He says the only Christmas feature film I make sure to watch every year. And his leave it was The Miracle on 34th Street. Now, this is the 90s version, which he said he's not sure he's ever seen. The next grouping, he had his love it was The Year Without a Santa Claus. His like it was Miracle on 34th Street. And an interesting note that he put with this one: I applied lessons learned from this movie to my retail job, to the retail job that I had when I saw it. And the fact that the little actress in it thought she was acting with the real Santa Claus is adorable. And his leave it was The Santa Claus. I'll have something more on that in a little bit. On our next group, Muppet Christmas Carol was his love it. It's a Wonderful Life, his like. And the leave it was The Christmas Chronicles, which he says he never saw. For the next one, Nightmare Before Christmas was his love it, followed by his like of Christmas Vacation, and his leave it was The Grinch, which, again, we're talking about the Jim Carrey one. Again, keep that in mind. He said, there are too many Grinch movies, and I'm not a Jim Carrey fan. Fair enough. And the last group, his love it was Santa Claus is Coming to Town. His like it was Rudolph. He said he's never been a fan of this, but he forces himself to watch it every year. And his leave it was Little Drummer Boy, which he said he hates, but he also forces himself to watch it every year. We were having a side conversation about this, Dan and I, and he said that, you know, there are these quintessential movies that he does watch every year simply out of, I guess, tradition. I don't understand why you'd watch something over and over again that you don't like, but hey, you know, you do you, Dan. Okay, and we had one other bit of feedback on this. Now, this was another Dan, and Dan took a little bit different approach to this. He looked at the lists in their entirety and tried to decide which list he loved, and which one he would leave. So I'm going to try to decipher some of this because it's a little hard because it is a Facebook comment. So bear with me a little bit. He said that his like it would be list 2. He said Home Alone and Frosty might not get much love from me if I saw them for the first time now, but the nostalgia is powerful. Plus the kids like Frosty, and Tom Hanks can save anything. So that okay, I don't agree that Tom Hanks could save the Polar Express, but to each their own. His leave is the list that had A Christmas Story. He said he didn't like it as a kid. He knows people love it, but he never understood it. A remake of something with Cary Grant seems pointless, and while he does like Charlie Brown, it doesn't save the list. His love list is It's a Wonderful Life and A Muppets Christmas Carol, which are 2 of his favorites on the same list. And he admits that he never saw the third movie in that grouping. But with that said, the other 2 seem to have enough cachet on their own. So there you have it, with a couple of people giving some feedback on these lists that we came up with. And off of this, you know, you may, if you follow us on social media, you'll see that I'll post clips, promotional clips, basically, you know, letting people know some little snippets of things that are in that episode, just to give them a taste and, you know, try to let people know what's happening in each episode. Well, a couple of these takes that Eileen and I had really blew up, especially on TikTok. Surprisingly so. I mean, I guess I wasn't surprised so much that people didn't necessarily agree with us on some of our opinions. But this was a level of interaction that I've had on TikTok that has surpassed previous levels. And a lot of you are angry. So talking about the Santa Claus, which, I have a very strong anti-stance on.
You hate the Santa Claus that much?
I do. That movie subverts the magic of Santa in such a perverse way. The entire premise of the movie is first Santa dying. Like the first half hour of the movie, you kill Santa Claus. That for me is enough. On top of everything else, you're embroiling like this whole thing with like custody battles and all this other stuff that you managed to make a movie about Santa Claus that has no magic in it. And that's a hard feat. And on top of everything else, every single major character in this movie is a gigantic whiner. Every single one of them is whining and lamenting their place in life, and nobody actually learns a thing. Okay. There's nothing good about this movie. A lot of people just basically accuse me of not watching the movie. Some of these comments. So he clearly didn't watch the movie. You obviously didn't pay attention. Santa didn't die. He went back to his old life. It is a great movie. Love it. All of it is good. Now, I, in that movie, never heard anything about the fate of Santa and the fact that Santa, falls off of a roof. I don't know. I don't know what else to tell you. But somebody said no magic because I said that they managed to make a movie about Santa that doesn't have any magic. No magic? Have you even watched the movie? Yes, I have watched this movie. I watched this movie several times. The more I've watched it, the more I've actually disliked it. No one learned a thing. Did he even watch it? There's a trend with some of this stuff. People apparently have picked up on things with this movie that I haven't. So I would say, oh, well, I guess I've got to go look back on this movie. But I really don't think I'm going to, honestly. Life's too short to spend a lot of time watching things that you you don't like. The other one that got some response was the take that Eileen and I had on the Jim Carrey Grinch movie.
When we watched the Jim Carrey Grinch, I did go see that in theaters. And I was so mad. It annoyed me so much. Like the girl who played Cindy Lou annoyed the crap out of me.
The Jim Carrey Grinch movie is hard for me to look at. Like beyond, you mentioned the girl being annoying. You mentioned, not liking Jim Carrey. Certainly he's over the top in this, but that was the assignment. I don't like anything about this movie. I don't like the set pieces. I don't like the costuming. I don't like, I don't like the dialogue. I don't like the way they talk to each other. There's nothing about this movie that like I like. So you're very accurate with saying this movie annoys you. It annoys the ever living crap out of me, and I don't understand why it's held in such high regard, especially when you put it up against the source material. One person said, watching two haters trying to rage bait is hilarious. Now, I would consider it rage baiting if everything that we were posting was super controversial or super negative or some kind of hot take. But that's not the case. I've posted a bunch of different takes on various movies, from this episode. And some of them are positive and some of them are negative. The fact that the negative ones are the ones that people respond to and react to, I think is more of a reflection of other users than it is necessarily of us giving an honest opinion of something. Somebody else, not everyone needs a podcast. Well, that may be true. Somebody else actually posted an image that was just like no fun allowed. I don't find the movie fun. I've been accused of, not liking fun before. Good old Greg Cameron, who is a friend of the podcast, accuses me of that on the regular. But this podcast is really about fun topics. So, maybe it's just a definition of what we find fun. And look, you like the Grinch, that's fine. You can go have at it. I just want nothing to do with it. So, got off on a little bit of a tangent there. I'm glad that we were able to have this talk, though. I feel like it was a little cathartic. I'm, a little bit, like I said, a little bit salty anyway. So I thought that, it was good to air some of this out. So, now that is out of the way, we will go on to a cheerier topic, and that is this week's Maza's Mickey Minute.
Donald, wake up! It's showtime! Don't forget the orchestra!
Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Mom says there's even more magical stuff now.
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the doors.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness. And here we go!
Okay, well, you know how sometimes I try to make sure that the minute matches up with our main topic. And in this particular case, the main topic, of course, is college football and Notre Dame college football. Well, lo and behold, today it was announced by the University of Notre Dame that junior running back Jeremiah Love has been named the recipient of the 2025 Disney Spirit Award. Now, this is directly from fightingirish.com. It says this prestigious award is presented annually to college football's most inspirational figure. Love is Notre Dame's first ever recipient of the Disney Spirit Award. Love has delivered a remarkable season on the field as a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, the Maxwell Award, the Walter Camp Player of the Year, the Doak Walker Award, and the Pony Express Award. His ability to astound, connect, and inspire has made him one of the most special college football players in the country. Not only has he wowed audiences with his play, he has played an active role in his community and inspired others across the country with his story. Now, I think that Love's story is actually legitimately, whether being a Notre Dame fan or not, it is. It's an inspiring tale, and it's one that shows that, even people who are different or, have unique challenges, just like the rest of us, they can do anything that they set their mind to. Continuing on. Love hopes to inspire others not just by his play, but by encouraging others to be wholly themselves, to embrace what makes them unique, and to do things their way. From a young age, this confidence was instilled by him by his family. Jeremiah has continued that confidence throughout his life. Growing up, he enjoyed doing things on his own and was very adventurous. When he started school, he operated differently. He had specific desires for his possessions and his organization. His parents worked with him to find what was best for him, and sports were found to be a great motivator for him. His confidence and his competitiveness was what propelled him to succeed. When his parents spoke with Jeremiah's doctor, he advised that while Love exhibited tendencies that could be considered, quote unquote, on the spectrum, Jeremiah should continue to operate as himself with his parents' support. It was important to not change Jeremiah, but let Jeremiah change the world. To this day, Jeremiah is fully comfortable in being exactly who he is and his talent on the field, combined with his personality, his competitiveness, and his outstanding talent, have taken the college football world by storm. Since the airing of Jeremiah's story on ESPN College Game Day, he has received countless messages of thanks, noting how he has inspired children and adults to pursue being their authentic selves. Love has made it important to connect with the community and fans, especially kids. This past summer, he put on a camp for more than 200 local children in the South Bend area. He also has hosted a financial literacy workshop for high school students in the South Bend area through a local partnership. He has also helped develop a comic book based off his own life and personality, entitled Jeremonstar, able to express his love of comics with creativity and a desire to share the messages of perseverance and embracing one's unique talents. So, really, like I said, I was going to make it a bit more positive here, and we've got a great Disney tie-in, a great inspirational story. You should be able to still find that piece that they did on College Game Day somewhere out there on the internet, I'm sure. I encourage you to go take a look at it, whether you are somebody who is or knows somebody who could be identified as on the spectrum, whether you're a football fan or whether you are just somebody who really appreciates, seeing people in a very human way. One way or another, I encourage you to go find that piece. Truly an inspiring story. Jeremiah Love, I'm sure, is going to be destined for great things, whatever he decides to do, which is most likely going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft next year. But it is a real testament to the idea that no matter who you are and what your challenges are, there is an opportunity for greatness. And especially when you find a network, a community, a village that will support you and allow you to operate the way you need to operate. So that is this week's Maza's Mickey Minute. You can't necessarily plan for every scenario, but you can certainly try. And you should let We Do Travel Right help you plan as much as you can. There are always going to be twists and turns in a trip for sure, but having a good solid plan will help make your trip go so much better. And that's why We Do Travel Right offers you the one-on-one service of an agent. But while you are getting that individualized attention, that agent is working with a team, and that team is working for you. Whether you're talking about park tickets, hotel reservations, getting those dining plans and dining reservations that you're looking for, or everything in between, even some of those things like helping you navigate the parks and figuring out how to use the apps and things like that. We Do Travel Right is here to help you. They even have things like seminars and study halls so that you can, kind of piece things together and really feel empowered to have a great trip. And the best thing is all of their services are free. You're not paying anything extra, whether you're going to Disney or Universal or on a cruise or to an all-inclusive. And why? That's because those places build the use of an agent into their pricing already. So you're paying for the agent whether you use them or not. So doesn't it just make sense to use the agent? So if you are ready to start your planning for your next vacation, go to wedotravelright.com/Maza. That's wedotravelright.com/MAZA and get your next magical vacation started today.
Well, I can't do any more damage around this popsicle stand.
So long, partner.
See you real soon.
All right. Hey, let's get right on into that main topic because we've got a lot to get through with Christian. And man, this is a great conversation. I think that, I'd be lying if I said that we were completely unbiased, but, I think that this is a really good examination of a decision that ended up leaving, inarguably one of the best teams in the country without an opportunity to play for a national championship. Alrighty, and I am here with Christian McCollum of Irish Sports Daily. He is joining me to talk some Notre Dame, and specifically the decision to leave Notre Dame out of the college football playoff. While I am hurting on the inside, because of the decision. I'm also admittedly playing hurt a little bit, getting over a cold. So, Christian, I'm going to be leaning on you a little bit more in terms of carrying the conversation here. But wanted to take the time to thank you for taking the time for being here. And if you want to introduce yourselves to those who are not familiar with you and your work.
Sure, yeah. Christian McCollum, as you said, I work for Irish Sports Daily. I'm a Springfield, Mass native, UMass grad, still live in Springfield. Like yourself, I grew up a Notre Dame fan, always wanted to be a sports journalist. In sixth grade, I think I finally made the decision that, being a pro athlete wasn't going to be an option for me. So I did the next best thing and just kind of pursued sports journalism. So went to UMass, started working at the Republican after my freshman year at UMass as an intern, continued working there throughout my time at UMass, and then, worked there full time. My total time at the Republican was probably about 10 years. Eventually, wanted to kind of spread my wings, grow a little bit, and an opportunity popped up from a website that I had been following as just a Notre Dame fan. At the time, it was called Irish Eyes. Interviewed, did some stuff out there, ended up getting a job. Moved out to South Bend I think I was there for about 3 years. Last 2 years of Charlie Weiss, first year of BK. And then eventually moved back to Springfield area to just be around family a little bit more. And ever since when I lived out in South Bend, I covered the team on a daily basis. Now for the last 10, 11 years, actually longer than that, 13, 14 years, I've been covering recruiting on a daily basis. And fortunately for me, Notre Dame recruits nationally. So I'm not really at a huge disadvantage in terms of not being in South Bend because, especially in years past, they've recruited Massachusetts and Connecticut heavier than they've recruited Indiana anyway. So, but I pinch hit from time to time. I call myself the Northeast correspondent for Irish Sports Daily. Anytime they're up here in New York, New Jersey, or Boston, I'll go out there and cover the game.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. Welcome. And so we'll just get right into it. Obviously, a disappointing end of the season for Notre Dame. They ended up opting out of playing in a bowl game altogether, which it does feel kind of weird that Stanford game is the last game of the season. And we'll get into that a little bit. But being a journalist myself, I try to look at these things while I'm a fan as objectively as possible. And of course, the big thing is, had Notre Dame won one of those two games at the beginning of the season, this isn't really, it kind of takes it out of the committee's hands. So we're looking at this with some teams that have some flaws to their resumes when you're talking about Notre Dame, Miami, Alabama. But I think the one thing that I keep running into a problem with here is, and I think that it's the big issue, is process. It's understanding how we got here. And I kind of felt that this was coming when they dropped from 9 to 10 and Alabama, moved up to 9 there. It kind of felt like they were giving Alabama some armor. But I think that that's the biggest problem when you get right down to it that people have when you get past all the hurt feelings and everything is people are trying to understand what the rationale was when almost universally it reached a point where I think after that USC game, people were basically just like, They just have to win out here and they're in. It seemed that way with the way that the committee was acting and with the way things were lining up. So what is your read on what happened here and how they ended up on the outside looking in?
Yeah. So a few things. So for Irish Sports Daily, at Irish Sports Daily, I took on the task for the last month or so of like actually consistently every week, multiple times a week, analyzing their path to the playoff, right? So I really dove in. I hooked up with a data scientist who's also a Notre Dame fan who would do the math, and we would break it down. And there were it did. I think Notre Dame fans in general thought winning we're in, 10-2 we're in. Once the first rankings came out, we would break it down, and we were telling fans on Irish Sports Daily the whole time, this is not a 10-2 you're in. There are landmines along the way that can blow up, right? And we identified a bunch of them, but in the end, it came down to three things: 5 SEC teams, 2 Big 12 teams, 2 ACC teams. It didn't end up being exactly 2 ACC teams. It ended up being an ACC team and a G5, but essentially it was an extra ACC team that wasn't the champion. And Notre Dame could avoid to have one of those things happen, but not 2. So we identified week by week, here are the games, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you should be paying attention to. And looking back on it, one of the big ones was that Alabama-Oklahoma game a couple weeks ago, because Oklahoma winning that game put Oklahoma in and left Alabama in the position to be in. Where if Alabama had won that game, Oklahoma would have been out. SEC would only got 4 teams. Obviously the Big 12, it became clear when we started it was Texas Tech and BYU were playing head to head. It became clear if the loser of this game comes back and wins, then they'll be in 2. That's another spot. And then it kind of always came down to the ACC. But when we broke it down, taking kind of the committee at face value, it seemed very, very difficult to imagine a scenario where Miami would get ahead of Notre Dame, right? And that's the problem with the process, where Miami was so low. They were like 18 when they started, or 17, and surely they climbed up. But and there was a point where they said, we have not compared Miami and Notre Dame directly to each other, so we haven't factored in the head-to-head, which makes complete sense, because if you just always use head-to-head with like 8 teams, you're just going to have teams pointing at each other saying, we beat you, but you beat me, and they beat them, So you can't do that. So that made sense. Then there was a week where they said, all right, Notre Dame and Miami are in the same tier. We have now compared them, and it factored in the head-to-head, and Notre Dame is still multiple spots ahead of Miami. So the fact that I agree, they definitely moved Alabama ahead of Notre Dame in the penultimate ratings, because if they hadn't done that, Alabama could fall out with a loss. They didn't want that to happen. It makes sense when we say that's why they did it. That's not fair. That's not the way it should go, but it makes sense. That didn't unnerve me as much, because I assumed they would want to do that. The problem was Notre Dame was always ahead of Miami, despite losing head-to-head, until the last week, literally 5 days after the rankings, and neither team played a game. Neither team they played a game. Nothing changed. And the idea that, well, we were looking at Notre Dame, BYU, and Miami, and we thought that was the order. But when we took BYU out, now we compared Notre Dame and Miami closer, and Miami's ahead. It makes no sense. I mean, you can say, who are the 3 best basketball players ever? I could say Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, LeBron James. And if you say, okay, don't count Larry Bird, all of a sudden that doesn't make LeBron James better than Michael Jordan all of a sudden. It just makes no logical sense. And that's the problem Notre Dame has had with this.
Now, I do think that there is something. I know that today, and I haven't had a chance to look at what his comments were today, but Pete Bavacqua has been very vocal. He's been out there, and obviously that's part of his job, is to advocate for his programs and his university. But I think that, there's already the national kind of sentiment that, that Notre Dame has some kind of preferential treatment or whatever, and now things aren't going their way, so they're whining about it. And truthfully, we can debate what the benefits and pitfalls of independence are until the cows come home. But in this specific case, I think that maybe Pete saying less would say more, when he starts tying in things like complaining about the ACC network playing, Miami, Notre Dame over and over again and things like that. I think that it takes away from what the true issue is, and that's the process which we're talking about. So I think that his message is getting a little bit diluted here. And I guess I don't see the end game of bringing all these other pieces into it when the issue is with the committee and its process.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think that I agree. The process is the number one issue, and that's what he's trying to change. But as you said, his job, first of all, Notre Dame fans are livid, right? And they want either answers or they want someone to stick up for them and speak their thoughts. And I think that's what he sees his job as, right? Like, I need to be the voice, because the opposite of that would be just to kind of say, okay, whatever, it is what it is. And, selfishly for him, that's not going to get him any, favors for his job security, in terms of like Notre Dame fans are not going to like him, right? So he's got to do that to be their voice. The other aspect of it, when you mentioned the ACC, is they legitimately feel betrayed by the ACC, and they are not a member of the ACC in football, which I get, but they are a member of the ACC in every other sport. In addition to that, they've been a pretty good partner for the ACC. COVID season, NFL or college football COVID season, Notre Dame joined the ACC to make that ACC season possible, and further to make the entire year possible for college football. It helped with that. This latest round of conference realignment, the ACC and the Big 12 are not among the top two, so it's SEC, Big 10. The ACC and Big 12 are teetering. Notre Dame helps. They come in and say, it doesn't make any sense, but they go out there and help engineer Stanford and Cal to join the ACC to help them, stay alive, right? They also have a scheduling agreement with the ACC where they play multiple ACC games a year. And, people might say, oh, well, that helps Notre Dame. Listening to Pete Pavakwa's press conference earlier, he said ACC teams generally sell out 23% of their games. When they're playing Notre Dame, they sell out 90% of the games. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of money, right? And the idea that, well, the ACC, why are you mad at the ACC for promoting Miami to be in? That's not what Pete Pavakwa's complaint is. It was very much Miami should be in and Notre Dame should be out. Now, the ACC, Jim Phillips put out a statement denying that. I mean, it's just false, right? Like, you can go back to the social media.
I think he's being disingenuous too.
It's not even disingenuous. It's false, right? Like, we didn't say Notre Dame. What you say, Team A versus Team B, right? Like, Team B is Notre Dame, and you do that multiple times. Pete Pavakwa said today, he said the first thing he saw when they first put something on social media, he thought it was someone, a younger person operating the account that got over their skis, and he expected like an apology, right? And just say that was a mix-up, won't happen again. And it happened again and again and again. And then they played Notre Dame, Miami on ACC Network on a loop, So I think, Notre Dame, they say they're harmed. They've been harmed. The relationship's been harmed. And the fact that he continues to say that over and over again, he hasn't made any outward threats that they're going to leave. But if I was Jim Phillips in the ACC right now, I'd be pretty nervous and be second guessing about the decisions they made in terms of trying to tear Notre Dame down a little bit there.
So let's talk a little bit about what those ramifications would be. And if we were to say, Notre Dame were to go nuclear on them and say, we're severing this. What was it? What does that look like? I'd imagine that there's some kind of buyout. There would have to be some kind of resolution for all of the other sports that Notre Dame has. Does Notre Dame have as much leverage as they are, kind of making themselves out to have in this situation?
I don't know. I've never seen that contractual language, that the agreements between themselves and the ACC. But if you think about it, I mean, I kind of follow some of this stuff a little bit closer than the average person, not so close if it doesn't have to directly do with Notre Dame. But I know Florida State and Clemson were investigating their ways to get out. And one of the, you want to say nuclear, one of their best options, because they would have to pay a buyout clause, obviously, and it was substantial. One of their best options was, well, if we leave and this conference collapses, we won't have to pay the buyout because there ain't going to be anyone to pay the buyout to because the conference won't exist. Now, that didn't work. That didn't end up happening. But, behind the scenes, could Notre Dame make it helpful for Florida State and Clemson to maybe get to the SEC or the Big 12 and for themselves to break away? And what happened? I mean, the ACC is literally, there's times when it's very close to just collapsing. So, I don't know that Notre Dame would do that. Obviously, I mean, Notre Dame has enough money that they could handle buyouts and, whatever kind of severance packages they would need to pay. I don't know that they would go that far. And I think it could be a game of I don't want to say mutually assured destruction because Notre Dame wouldn't be destroyed, but they could really harm the ACC. Will they go that far? I don't know if they will.
Now, another thing that you mentioned that Pete Pavakwa mentioned sellouts in the ACC, and just touching on that a little bit more anecdotally than anything. My wife and I considered, my wife's a BC grad, and we looked into going to the Notre Dame BC football game. We've gone in the past. We used to be season ticket holders at BC. Through some terrible years, through the Steve Adazio years and the Spaziani years before that. So some really bad times, but
not much better this year.
But the thing is, those tickets, a secondary market, were selling for more than the season ticket packages, for certain season tickets. So anecdotally, I don't have any statistical, backing for this, but anecdotally, there were people who were buying season ticket packages to Boston College football to gain access to the Notre Dame game, and then selling off the rest of the tickets. So it's really an interesting kind of dynamic here, where there are, and I mean, you look at the Clemsons and the Florida States, they're probably going to draw one way or the other. But these other schools, you look at the Dukes or the Boston Colleges, Wake Forest, exactly. There's a benefit to them. And the question, I guess, a little bit is the ACC as worried about what those teams think as much as they worry about what the Clemsons and the Florida States of the world think in all this?
I'm sure they're not, but the Clemson and the Florida States of the world aren't very happy, right? They haven't been very happy with the TV deal. I know they redid it. But I have a guy that's pretty spot on this stuff, and we've been texting about, everything that's happened the last couple of days and in regard to the ACC. And he maintains that Clemson and Florida State are going to the Big 12 sooner than people realize, right? So again, what's a conference look like without Clemson, Florida State, and maybe Notre Dame? It's Miami football and Duke basketball and Duke, North Carolina basketball. And I mean, at that point, you're talking about something crumbling to the fact where if you're Duke and North Carolina and you're in that conference, and you're probably having discussions with schools like UConn and Syracuse to say, hey guys, maybe we should do something together for basketball, right? And so now if you have no Duke, nor North Carolina, no Clemson, no Florida State, you have no conference. So they might not be worried the same way they're not worried about like Wake Forest and NC State and Boston College think. Those might be the only schools left. So they need to, they need to keep it together. And this is just one more thing I'm not saying it's going to end the ACC, but it's could be dangerous.
Yeah. And, I'm looking at, and the thing is, when we talk about this and we talk about scheduling and things like that, this agreement with the ACC really hasn't helped them at all in terms of, strength of schedule, or when you look at some of the teams that they've played. I mean, they played a 2-win BC team, for example, this year. I mean, you look at next year, They're going to be playing again BC, SMU, Syracuse again, who was not very good. So it doesn't seem like there's much of an argument for them to join a conference the way that people say, well, you want to you want to be looked at more legitimately in this, join a conference. I guess the only thing that they'd have going for them is a conference championship, but then you're looking at a situation like this year where it's a conference that had a 7-5 team win their conference championship game. So how legitimate is that, period?
Yeah. Well, one thing about Notre Dame, and there's, trust me, Notre Dame is not a perfect institution. It's not a perfect place. It's not run by perfect people, but they are pretty self-aware, right? So they understand they're preserved like this special status, and they understand, hey, we're going to put all of our schools and all of our teams in the ACC, except we're going to keep the, or side hockey, but except we're going to keep our, most valuable commodity back. And they understand they have to give with that. So they're like, all right, we're going to do this. And since you're going to help us, we're also going to, let's do this scheduling partnership. They, the other schools are getting more out of that than Notre Dame is. Notre Dame could schedule whoever they want. But they do try to be a good partner. And at least they try to negotiate from a standpoint of good faith, which, I mean, like they were really, you can tell that just listening to Bavacqua, they're both shocked and hurt by the way the ACC treated them.
Now, when they're doing this scheduling, does the ACC dictate when those games occur, or does it? Yeah, I'd imagine that it's much easier to when a team is part of a conference, the scheduling is much easier as opposed to trying to work this kind of halfway situation that they have. So, who has the has the power or the leverage in that? Is it the ACC that's got the final say on what the schedule looks like and who plays who when, or does Notre Dame hold the cards there?
Again, I think it's just another example of kind of Notre Dame and up to this point, ACC having a good partnership. And it seems like they do a good job working together, right? Like, Notre Dame has always had that Stanford's in the ACC now, so it kind of helps, but they've always had that last weekend in November, either against Stanford or USC. We'll see what happens with USC moving forward. They also, kind of like to have some freedom for their opening game. They played at Miami this year, but they've played obviously in Dublin in the past. They play Wisconsin next year at Lambeau to start. So they like to have some flexibility. But like I said, it seems like it's worked good together up to this point. Notre Dame also has its Shamrock Series-ish game that doesn't happen every year, that they like to have some flexibility with. And of course, you're dealing with TV contracts, which games are on NBC, which games are on, ACC Network or ESPN or ABC. But it just seems like they've done a good job working together and getting through all those issues.
Now, moving on to they're not in the playoff. They decide that they're not going to play at all. Now, was this the announcement said something to the effect of the team has made the decision? Was that an actual player decision, or did the program make a decision?
Yeah, see, the other thing, especially with the football program, they really do respect the student athletes and give them a lot of latitude. They let them have the ownership of the team in the way that Marcus Freeman does it. It's not a thing where they sit in a goog and they raise their hand, whose votes we play, whose votes we don't. Marcus Freeman has the captains talk to the team. Team gets a good kind of, they get a good feel from the team, and then they kind of inform Marcus Freeman what they want to do. I mean, anyone that saw the series on Peacock last year could have seen that play out on smaller levels where he likes to try to get the feedback from the team through the captains. And maybe they bring in a couple other people to take, get the feeling broader throughout the roster. But it's a player thing, right? Like they would not tell these players. Now, this maybe would happen in the past, but just under the current administration and head coach Marcus Freeman, they weren't going to tell these kids, sorry guys, if you want to play, we ain't playing, because as an institution, we're upset. Like, if anything, it might have been the other way around, where the players said we didn't want to play, and the institution said, no, we're going to play. But the thing is that college football now, and I'm a huge college football fan. It's my favorite sport. Growing up, I understand it used to be different. And sometimes it can be hard to let go of those traditions and the way we remember things. But there's changes usually comes about for good reason. I mean, I remember when I was 10, 11, I'm like, wait, what? How come the two best teams didn't play and you're going to make them co-national champions? That doesn't make any sense. And people that are all hung up on the head-to-head, right? Chris, we're about the same age. What happened in 1993? Notre Dame beat Florida State. Then they lose to BC the next week. And Florida State plays, I don't even know who they played in the bowl. Notre Dame played A&M in a bowl. They both finished 11-1. Notre Dame beat Florida State. Florida State's the national champions, right? So 12-year-old me had a real problem with that, okay? So the bowls were great, and people remember, January 1st, all the bowls. That's not the way it is anymore. And now with the playoff, if you're going to the NFL and you're not playing in the playoff, it is just, very, very understood and common practice now to not play in the bowl game. I know when it first started, people were really hung up on it. I think Christian McCaffrey was probably one of the first guys to do it. And fans had a hard time coming to grips with that because it's just so foreign to the idea of team and everything like that. And I get it. But people now understand it. Like Jeremiah Love is not going to play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Okay. He's not. Right. He's set to potentially make hundreds of millions of dollars that will set up his family for generations. And it makes no sense to risk it in the Pop-Tart Bowl for a team. And I think people have problems with that. Imagine if it was your son, right? And some people might say, oh, well, I still want him to do teamwork. I don't want him to let down the team, right? Well, here's the other thing. The team doesn't want Jeremiah Love to play. That's their boy, right? Like if I was in college and my best friend's going to make a $250 million, as long as he doesn't break his leg in the next 6 months and he wants to play football for no reason, I'm not letting him. You know what I mean? These guys, their teammates don't want him to play. So the idea of turning down the bowl, it wasn't going to be this version of Notre Dame. You weren't going to see Jeremiah Love and J.D. Price out there, and there's probably some other guys. Kenny Minchie just will enter the transfer portal. He wouldn't be there as C.J. Carr's backup. It would be just some odd, merger of, guys that are hanging around, some young guys that maybe didn't get a chance to play, and the team just decided, you know what, we don't want to put that product out there. We don't want to go out there. We want to, our team did what we did. We got left out. It is what it is. But we're calling it a season.
Yeah. Obviously as a fan, I would love to watch more football, so had they played, great. The thing that is really kind of a non-starter for me is the pearl clutching about, this is going to damage the sanctity of, of the bowl season. Look, it was already, it was already broken when you started handing out bowls to anybody who was waving around the sponsorship. And, you have a situation where you have teams that are sub 500 just so that you can fill these bowl games. And Notre Dame's best option, because any bowl that's of any prestige is really involved in the playoff at this point, you're looking at a bowl game where an anthropomorphic Pop-Tart being cooked and then eaten by the winner is like the draw. Like you have to have something that insane to get people to watch. So it really, it doesn't, the argument doesn't work because the bowl system was already broke. When you established the playoff, you broke the bowl system essentially. It's fine. It's exhibition for people or for teams that want to play more football, or, for some teams, maybe it's a recruiting tool. Maybe, honestly, I've heard more stories about teams that end up losing money, schools that lose money, going to these bowl games than they bring in. So their revenue is hit or miss. So when people start talking about, oh, this sets a bad precedent, the precedent was set. This is just the first team that is of this caliber. The fact that you're looking at this in a team of this caliber, you're almost admitting, yeah, this is a playoff caliber team that is walking away from this, and that's why it's a problem. which
For sure.
indicates the main problem in the first place.
Yeah, the Bulls, I mean, like I kind of wrote it yesterday, is like, if one team opting out of the Pop-Tart Bowl is going to collapse the system, then the system's got a rotten foundation to begin with, right? That just tells you all you need to know. And it's not like, every single team. And if they did, it's the same deal. I wouldn't have any problem with any individual team, but it just shows you how fragile that system is to begin with. And the only reason that it exists is for gambling, right? These games would have 0 ratings if it wasn't for gambling, which I'm not opposed to at all, right? But like, again, the pearl clutching like missed me with that, because these games are for gamblers. That's it. It wouldn't exist if they weren't. The sponsors wouldn't have any money. ESPN wouldn't get any money if you couldn't bet on these games. So let's not act like it's the purest thing in the world.
Now, getting back to the playoff, looking at what the field is now, do you think we are looking at a rematch of Indiana and Ohio State in the national championship?
Potentially. It looks like those are the best 2 teams, right? Those are the best 2 teams. I think it's pretty clear Georgia and Texas Tech are the next 2 teams that have a good argument at that case. Oregon's always kind of scary. I think they're, can really do some damage. Ole Miss, obviously, with the Lane Kiffin situation, is not going to be the same. Who am I missing there? Who's 6? Or is it Ole Miss 6 or who's 7 then?
I don't have the rankings right in front of me.
Oklahoma doesn't seem like a danger. Alabama doesn't seem like a danger. Miami doesn't. Obviously, the 2 group of 5 schools don't. A&M 7.
That's it there.
They are a really, really good team. Obviously, they beat Notre Dame in that second game of the season. And you look back and you hate to think about it, but man, that A&M finish, as gut-wrenching as it was in the moment for Notre Dame fans, I don't think anyone's watching that game again, especially the last 90 seconds when Tyler Buckner drops the PAT snap. You give up a big kickoff return. The referee misses an obvious holding penalty on the deciding play. But A&M, they do have a pretty dynamic offense. But yeah, I think Ohio State is still the best team in the country, even though they lost to Indiana this weekend. They have the best player in the country in Jeremiah Smith. They're pretty well-rounded. It'll take me a little bit to kind of, get the bad taste out of my mouth for the playoff this year, but I think those are the top 2 teams. You can never sleep on Georgia. And, people I talk to a lot have told me Texas Tech might be the best team in the country. I haven't watched Texas Tech that much, but what I've heard, they are really good. The only game they lost, their quarterback was hurt. And they pretty much smashed everybody else. That in this era of NIL, Texas Tech has invested tremendous resources into the program, and it's already paying off. So I think I would expand it kind of to those 5 schools. I think any Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas A&M, or Georgia, Texas Tech, and Oregon. I think those are the teams that have the best shot. Obviously, top 5 schools, but beyond that, when you get to Ole Miss, even A&M, Alabama, Oklahoma, and the group of 5 schools, I don't really see that happening.
Yeah. Now, I mean, but when you look at the group of 5 schools, one that I look at that I do have some admiration for is James Madison. Like you look, this was a team that not that long ago was an FCS team, a good FCS team, but an FCS team, that has really nailed the transition, to the FBS. And that brings me to another painful point probably for you, but another team that has made the shift recently in UMass. Is there any fixing that UMass program?
Might be tough. In addition to that, work for Irish Sports Daily, we started a UMass website, Minuteman Command. Myself, my friend Tommy Guy, and a good buddy of ours, Dave Bowden, who's down in Texas coaching football. But anybody in the Springfield area might be familiar with Tommy Guy. He's one of the best guys around. Tommy grew up in the same area as UMass's new head coach, Joe Harris-Simiak. So he had always put me on Joe Harris-Simiak's name long time ago. He'd say, that's my buddy Joey. And at one point, before Marcus Freeman was hired as the DC at Notre Dame, Harris-Simiak's name was on a list of potential DC candidates for Notre Dame. So I'm like, oh man. So I kind of started following his career from there, knowing that, one of my friends crossed paths with him, and he was an up and coming coach. And so when I got word that he was a potential hire at UMass, I started thinking like, UMass doesn't really have a website that covers it like Irish Sports Daily covers Notre Dame. And, Notre Dame and UMass are very different, but I'll tell you this, the fan bases are just as, energetic, and it might not be as large, but UMass fans are diehard. And right now they're an angry bunch. They've been angry for years. Can they turn it around? I think I'm still biased in this, and I think they can. I have knowing some people around that program, I understand their plan. And it involves investing money into, the roster. So Harris-Simiak comes from Rutgers last year. He's hired December 4th, which is National Signing Day. So I think they had 2 kids signed that had been committed previously. And then he has maybe a total of 56, maybe less days to attack the transfer portal and try to rebuild a roster that had been gutted. Now, I talked to some coaches on that staff, and there were some guys in that transfer portal they got that they were extremely high on, like really, really high on. The quarterback, Brandon Rose, they felt really good about. There was a defensive end, Josh Nobles, who they thought was a pro. He got hurt, ruptured his Achilles in preseason. Brandon Rose, his time, I feel a little bit bad for the kid. The situations just didn't work out between injuries and, production. So obviously UMass had a terrible season this year. 0-12 by far. Like we can argue about who's number 1, who's number 2, who's number 9, who's number 10, who's number 11. We cannot argue about who's number 135 or whatever it is, because UMass gets that crown. But I think if they have enough money relative to their peers in the MAC that they should be able to put together a roster that can be competitive. Now, that's going to require evaluation is going to be key in that. You're picking from a group of players. I hate to kind of talk about them like they're not people, but you're actually picking from the pile is going to be less, right? So you're picking from people for whatever reason are in the transfer portal. Either they're not good enough at the place they went to first. The place they went to first wasn't that same level, so they're trying to move up. Maybe they got injured. Maybe they have bad attitudes. There's a lot of reasons. Whenever you're in the transfer portal, if it's for a good reason, we still need to figure out why weren't you at this level to begin with. Other than that, it's probably for a negative reason. So, and when you're at UMass's level, you're going to have to do some convincing. And what they're hoping for is that dollars and cents can carry a lot of that convincing. I know a lot of people were disappointed in Harris-Simiak's performance this year. Hard to argue against that. But I knew of Joe Harris-Simiak for a long time. I got to know him better this season since he's been hired for the last year. And I'm firmly convinced he has what it takes to be a good coach. Totally convinced. I think maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I did not expect him to go 0-12. But just the things that he's made of and his attitude is everything I would take in a coach. And even the people that don't like him, when they watch his press conferences, or I shouldn't say don't like him, but don't believe in him. When they watch his press conferences, they're either impressed, inspired. Some of them will say they feel bad for the guy because they like him. But it's not BS, right? I've been around him enough and seen him do it that if he can't do it, I'm convinced no one's going to be able to.
Well, and I think that one of the feeling that I've gotten from some people, fans that I've talked to, is it's not so much a lack of faith in the coach. It's a lack of faith in the institution for which he's working, and a question as to whether or not they are willing to invest the way that they need to. especially because now they're playing a lot of catch up because things have gone so poorly for as long as they have. Heck, who would have thought that the Charlie Molnar years would have been the good old days, but so I think that is more of the sentiment than it is surrounding the coach himself.
Sure. And I mean, a lot of that anger is directed squarely at the athletic director, Ryan Bamford. A lot of people, for whatever reason, seem to think that we have this relationship with Ryan Bamford. I've spoken to Ryan Bamford twice in my life, and both have been in press conference settings, and neither was more than 2 months ago. Never communicated with the guy before. And so people have their own opinions about Ryan Bamford. And I try to keep those separate from Joe Harris-Simiak, because everything Ryan Bamford has done in the past, the hires have not worked, especially when it comes to football. My first remembrance of Ryan Bamford was when he tried to hire Pat Kelsey for the UMass basketball job, and they were doing the press conference, and Pat Kelsey just left. And I think that was like one of his first acts. And I remember man, Pat Kelsey, that's a good coach. Whoever this new AD at UMass must know what he's doing. And then he basically got stood up, and I'm like, ouch, that's a tough start. And the hires for football have not worked out. One of the things that kind of confuses me about UMass fans is they will, rightly so, complain about all the football hires he made and how bad they've been, but then at the same time complain that he fired Don Brown. And it's like, it's either you didn't like the hire or you didn't like the fire. It's one or the other. But I think a lot of those people who have, their feelings about Ryan Bamford have transitioned those to Harris-Simiak to say, well, if I think this guy sucks, he couldn't possibly have made a good hire. So I assume, and I believe Harris-Simiak sucks. And a lot of it should be almost like a broken clock, right? It's going to get it at some point. You're going to get it right. But no, they just kind of assume, well, he hired him, so he must suck. And to their credit, when you go 0-12, it's not really going to do anything to change anybody's mind. So, there's some people out there, I see them on social media, UMass fans, that are like, I'm not giving another dime to UMass or supporting them until they get rid of Ryan Bamford. I really don't have any dog in that fight. But when they kind of take it on to Harris-Simiak and just assume he's worthless, I don't think that really adds up.
All right. So circling it back to Notre Dame, one final question. Any concerns or worries about Marcus Freeman going to the NFL?
I think you'd be naive to say no, but I don't think so now, right? Like eventually at some point, I mean, coaches leave, right? They, aside from Lane Kiffin, maybe Nick Saban, Urban Meyer a little bit, a lot of times it's hard to get a coach away from a blue blood program. So Notre Dame is certainly hoping that, but I mean, he's a young guy. I don't know how young. He's younger than us. I know that. So the idea that he's going to be at Notre Dame for the rest of our lives is laughable. I think a more immediate concern, I've heard that Ryan Day wants to go to the NFL. If Ryan Day goes to the NFL, leaves Ohio State to go to the NFL, Marcus Freeman went to Ohio State, played at Ohio State. If there's one program in the country you can see him leaving for, it'd be Ohio State. I know NFL teams are interested in Marcus Freeman. How wouldn't they be? But I don't think he would leave right now for an NFL job, especially after what's happened in the last 72 hours or so. But if Ryan Day were to leave, in Ohio State, a job like that doesn't come open very often. So that would be a bigger concern of mine. So I think if you're a Notre Dame fan and you're hoping that Marcus Freeman stays, let's hope Ryan Day stays where he is too.
All righty. Well, Ryan, Christian, thank you very much for taking the time.
No problem.
I know that it's a busy time right now. We're winding down the football season, which is then of course going to ramp up everything else that's going on. But and plus we've got the holidays and we both have kids, so that's a whole different kind of scenario. So I appreciate you taking the time. If you want to take another minute to let people know where they can find you and your work, fire away.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate you having me. But yeah, Notre Dame fans, irishsportsdaily.com. We're also on Twitter at ISD Update. And anyone that wants to read up on the Minutemen, MinutemanCommand.com. It's a free site we started up kind of as a hobby. We'll see how long we can keep this going with the results we're getting. But MinutemanCommand.com and UMass Command on Twitter.
All right. Well, hey, thanks again. And any parting shots or anything else you wanted to mention that we didn't touch on?
No, not really. Just I do think Notre Dame has a really. I know we talked about the processes with what we're upset about, but Notre Dame's upset about. But I can't find a metric where you don't consider that team one of the. Forget about top 10 teams, top 8 teams, and I think Vegas usually those guys actually put stuff on the line, right? So they had UMass as the third best team, greatest chance to win the whole thing, and that was with their inclusion in doubt, right? So Notre Dame, the process is what they're pretty upset about, but just on the surface of it, you're talking about leaving out a team that legitimately had a chance to win the whole thing. And I think you will see the most motivated Notre Dame football team of our lifetimes, past, present, future, next year. That'll be fun to watch. I don't know if it'll be the best team, but that will be the most motivated football team we ever see.
Yeah, I just quickly threw together something when you're talking about metrics, and it was basically a composite ranking that included the AP poll, FPI, things like strength of record and net efficiency, and put them in a calculator and said, give me a 12-team playoff using these metrics, and it's spit out Notre Dame as number 7. When you take into consideration all these different metrics. So to your point, yeah, there are a lot of metrics that on top of the process just doesn't add up.
The Miami thing, like, I know people are just like, well, head to head's the tiebreaker. That's like a tiebreaker, like when you're like doing playoffs and standings matter and stuff like this. This committee is tasked with picking the 12 best teams, right? Or right. 10 best, however, depending on their AQs. But however you put that down, like just the idea that, oh, well, that team beat that team, so they're better. It doesn't make any sense. If that was the case, every single Super Bowl champ would be undefeated because if they lost to someone, then that team should be better. And I know that's a simplistic way to look at it, but it's true of like head to head does not just define who's better, or the best team would just be undefeated every year. And, I saw people arguing that Miami should be in, understanding that it's the 12 best teams, and then say, if they played Notre Dame tomorrow, I think Notre Dame would win. Well, what are you talking about then? You know what I mean? Like, so that's part of the frustration. I could live with, like Pete Vacqua said, if Miami moved ahead of Notre Dame as soon as they were compared and Notre Dame could never catch them, I could disagree with that, but live with that. But as Pete Vacqua said, to have the rug snatched out from under them, that's something that's going to sting for a while.
All right. And one last thing that I just thought of, odds that Jeremiah Love wins the Heisman.
Very low, very low. I was thinking about going out there. I wouldn't say 0. You need some kind of, maybe Julian Sain and Fernando Mendoza split a vote, and Diego Pavia, they all split their votes. Now, had Jeremiah Love not got injured against Stanford and done what I expected them to let him try to do, I think it'd be a very different conversation. But I expect Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback in Indiana, to win that award.
Me too. All right. I'll let you go, Christian. Thank you very much for the time.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
If this is your first time listening, thank you and welcome. If you've been listening since the beginning, welcome back. All the ways that you support us are so important, and I'm so appreciative of them. And really, the best way that you can help this podcast is by letting people know, talking about it and saying, hey, I'm listening to this great podcast. Tell your family, tell your friends, especially if you've got Disney enthusiasts, if you've got sports enthusiasts, if people who are just curious about a lot of different things, because we touch on a lot. Let them know. And if you're not telling them word of mouth, please leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcatcher, because that will help bump us up in those algorithms that make us more visible. When we're more visible, well, more people have the opportunity to listen, and we'll grow this community that we're building here. And speaking of community, there are lots of ways that you can connect with us. We're on all kinds of social media. We're at the Maza's Musings podcast on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Yes, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Maza's Musings Pod. We have a Blue Sky account. It's one of those long things. So, just search for Maza's Musings Podcast. You'll find it. We also have a TikTok at Maza's Musings Podcast. Had a great interaction that I mentioned before. This is another great way that you can touch base with us. And we also have a YouTube page. So go like and subscribe there as well. You can find this information and so much more on our website, mazasmusings.wordpress.com. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter. You'll get information on past episodes that are coming up, other cool things that we've got going on. Along the way, there are little expenses. So if you wanted to take that support just one step further, you can always buy us a blue milk. And buying us a blue milk, which you can find the link to also on our website, is just a small way to help us with some of the small monetary costs that go into putting this podcast together. As I said, however you are supporting us, whether you're listening for the first time or buying us blue milk, everything in between, we love it all, appreciate it all, and as always, I hope you have a great weekend and a great week. For the Maz's Musings podcast is brought to you by Hi Dad Soup. Check them out at Mickey and Minutes on Instagram.